Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to another Saw Legacy discussion. Now, today I am once again joined by the Golden Scouter. Scouter, why don't you say hello, man?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? And how's it going, real?
It's good, man. So Golden Scout is also awesome guy. Go check him out. Go check him out. It doesn't necessarily cover this stuff, but if you like Dragon Ball and all that stuff, go make sure to go check him out. Anyway, we have a discussion for y'all today. You saw everything. You know exactly what's going on. Personally, I've been wondering whether or not, basically Amanda Young is going to be in Saw Legacy. Now, personally, we don't necessarily know whether she is or not going forward right now, but I mean, I guess we could say it's probably more than likely that she will not be in Saw Legacy. That being said, I was thinking I wanted to have this general discussion about whether or not she should be, because basically for me at least, and I feel like a lot of fans for this franchise, it doesn't necessarily feel like a Saw film without Amanda's character. I mean, there's a bit of a lull, for Saw 4, 5, and 7, I think. And she was in 6, one of the reasons 6 was so good. But before we go any further in this, what are your thoughts on this, Scouter? Do you think that that's somewhat true? Or do you think, did Hoffman kind of pick up the rings from her and actually become a more interesting character? Because there are people who think that way too.
Well, to be quite honest, I would have liked it better if Amanda would have taken on Jigsaw's legacy, because I find her character to be far more complex than Hoffman just wanting vengeance for some ex-boyfriend killing his sister.
No, I completely agree. And the thing is they both turned out a little bit differently than what we wanted. But I mean, personally, one of the things I would like to have seen, because I like both of them, I think they both have something to offer to the franchise. But, just that interaction we saw from them in Saw 6, it does make me wonder what it would happen if they had decided to basically have it go on where it's just these two basically interacting, kind of back and forth at each other, because they're both kind of, I guess they're like, sibling rivalry type of situation between them. And I know a lot of people would love to have seen more of that. In fact, if they do bring back Costas Mandylor, which supports, recent rumors said that they're not necessarily going to bring her back or him back. No real reason that they should bring her back. Her story is done for the most part. But I would personally really like for that to happen, just because I feel like the scenes from Saw 6 are some of the best ones that we actually got throughout the entire series.
Definitely, I mean, that is probably a good element of why Saw 6 was so good. After all, I thought that 4 was pretty subpar, and 5, I mean, I liked 5 somewhat, but I just did not like the ending of 5. But I would love to see a side story with Amanda and Hoffman, like just a new Saw film that's just a side story of those two characters and their interaction and just their whole legacy with Jigsaw.
Mm-hmm. No, that'd be really cool, or at least a side story. Have a video coming out about this sometime in the next week, or maybe it's out before this video comes out. I'm not necessarily sure, but it's basically like ways that they could reboot the franchise. And honestly, it's somewhat interesting to me, considering the fact that it's such an ever expanding mythology. We don't necessarily need to basically limit it to just films. They could actually do spin-offs and books and comic books and stuff, and we can get those interactions that we never really got to see and get more of the story kind of implemented through other forms of media, especially this day and age where expanded universes are all the rage. That's something that they could do. I don't necessarily think she's going to be in the next film, like I keep saying, but just personally, one of the reasons I feel like it's not necessarily a Saw film without Amanda was because, first of all, she was personally there from the very beginning. One of the only survivor before they retconned that in future films. The first survivor, the only survivor. Kind of this, a lot of people think very emotional relationship-wise, sexual even. Her relationship between John and her. But at the same time, I just feel like it's like father-daughter type of a loving situation. As she says in the second film, I found myself a father, a leader, a teacher. And that emotional weight that she was bearing in Saw 3, where he was dying and she doesn't really know what to do, plus everything else that's going around, like his letter. What did that letter say? That's some way that they could bring her back. What did her letter say, other than the note that we know that Hoffman wrote from Saw 6 and Saw 3, 4, 5, whenever they were actually showing it and teasing us for years and years and years. But what was the letter from it, actually? What was the letter that she got? Because it was more than just that note. It was a big pile. It was a big stack of letters, or at least paper. So I was always wondering, like, what that was, what her intention, or his intention for her, had she actually succeeded in the game. And if there was going to be a way to bring her back, at least the remnants of what she was supposed to do after Saw 3, if everything had turned out differently, then that probably would have been the way to do it. Because, and I'll let you talk in a minute here, but I was just wondering, and I've always just thought, you were talking about Saw 4 and Saw 5, but Amanda's character, to me, one of the lines I love from Saw 3 is basically when she decides to kill Lynn, which, all the spoilers from this video aside, Hoffman tells her to kill Lynn, who Dr. Gordon basically picked out and helped develop the game. You have John's like, don't kill her, she's more important than you know, blah, blah, blah. And then she kills him. And he's like, oh, you just destroyed 4 lives. And he starts crying because of all this stuff that's happened and all this stuff that he's been trying to teach her, putting her through all of these intense emotional games. And then essentially her choice had the ripple effect that basically led, in my opinion, to the rest of the films. Because if she had succeeded, then whatever that letter that he wrote to her would have actually been the future film or future of the franchise, but it was just really wasn't to be. So that's something that they could explore in the next film, and if they do, they would have to bring her back, at least in my opinion. So what are your thoughts on all that spiel? I know it's a big little rant session that I just had.
Well, with the whole thing of all the sequences with the letter, I mean, all that was done so that way Hoffman would be the quote-unquote sole survivor in that factory. And I don't know, but the thing is if there was going to be a side story with Amanda and Hoffman, I think that it would nicely fit in between Saw 2 and 3. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh no, I completely agree. It's something that personally I would really like to see something like that, be it in like a flashback or something, if they do any future sequels. Say if Saw Legacy is actually something that kind of takes off. I mean, what is Costas Mandylor doing? What is Shawnee Smith doing at this point? They all have, everyone has their careers, but it's not necessarily, it's not necessarily, they're not booming right now. They're not superstars yet. So it's obvious that they could actually come back. Saul has a good history of bringing back people even for small roles. So if they do another sequel and they're interested, it would be really nice to see them come back and reprise their roles. And yeah, those situations between Saul 1 and Saul 2, and even Saul 2 and Saul 3, just to kind of get a flashback or get more of a semblance of their character, maybe even push the story forward even a little bit more just based on what they were doing. And always interesting to see. One of the things I remember a lot of people were really interested in seeing going into Saw 6 was more interaction between the two, especially because Hoffman was kind of retconned into being there before Amanda. Maybe even seeing how he played a part in Amanda's game versus how they interacted going forward, considering Hoffman helped Jigsaw basically. I guess Hoffman helped Jigsaw put up the house test in the second film, and then also how they were interacting during the third film, which was what we really got to see during Saw 6. So definitely would have been really interesting to see their interactions going into that. And, it's always been, I think it always will be something that's really ripe for a lot of the fans to get those interactions, but not necessarily something that we'll ever see. And personally, I hate that concept because, like I've said, she is just so integral. She's so important to the entire concept of the series. Just as a character, she holds so much weight, and her decisions have ripple effects that basically cause, most of the events of the entire series to occur. So I feel like it's not a Saw film without Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, the first 3 are classics, no doubt about that.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And like you said, personally, like I disagree. I feel like Saw 4 is a pretty solid film for what it was, and then Saw 5 to me wasn't necessarily the best film in the franchise. I feel like it's probably one of the worst.
Me too. I was kind of disappointed at Strom dying.
Yeah, like I don't know, no, like it was really kind of weird, and then they brought back Perez in the next film, and that wasn't. It was just weird. They made a lot of bad decisions going into it, and I hope if they do more films, not just bringing back people like Shawnee Smith or Casas Mandalore, or even just a lot of other people that probably won't be in Saw Legacy, or characters that we haven't seen in a long time, because Saul's always had that kind of ability to bring back people who were important in other films, but we got to see kind of how they were tangibly connected to the entire narrative. I would really like for them, if they do more films, to basically not do one every year. I know that really worked for them going into the original 7 films, but if they're going to make more films after Legacy, then they should really kind of decide to take a year or two off with each film, stop striking when the iron's hot, and just make really good stories that can live up to the potential of the creativity from the creative team that we have going into this film.
I agree, and especially if Costas Mandalore or Shawnee Smith return, I want them to be passionate about their roles. Because I think the reason why Dr. Gordon, Cary Elwes coming back was such a disappointment was just because we know that he doesn't know anything about the Saw series and was just like, oh, I can get into this role and make a ton of cash because all the fanboys are out there and want to see Dr. Gordon from that very first film that I probably barely remember.
Yeah.
So, yes, passion with the actors is very important to me.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I remember that. I definitely remember that, especially going into Saw 3D. As a super fan myself, I don't know if you remember that when he was giving the interviews and they were asking him all the questions from the series and he had no idea what they were talking about.
Yes.
It's like, it's just a little, like that was the writing was on the wall from the very beginning. Kevin Greuter, the editor for the first 5, the director of the last 2, when they stole him from Paranormal Activity 2, because he was tapped to direct Paranormal Activity 2, but they stole him back Twisted Pictures for the last Saw film, even though David Hackle was going to direct it, the director of the 5th film, which I thought was probably a good idea because David Hackle worked as basically this, the set designer and stuff for the 2, 3, 4, and 2, 3, and 4, which would have worked for 3D, but the writing was on the wall from Saw 3D from the get-go that it was just going to be a mess, and it definitely was. So yeah, if they do come back in any way, shape, or form, hopefully it's not just for a paycheck, and that's one of the reasons I think that it's going to be great if Shawnee Smith comes back. I feel like she's proven, maybe she might be done with it in this point of her life, but she's at least proven in the past that she absolutely loves the character. The work that they did on it, her and Tobin Bell did on it going into Saw 3, their development of their characters and just their personal relationship is something, if you listen to their commentary on the 3rd film, just something pretty cool that you don't necessarily get to hear about like characters doing, and even more shocking so that it's a horror film. And they actually went and they spent nights basically working over all this stuff about their characters and their development and how they get along and all this stuff that basically, in my opinion, really comes through pretty heavily in the film. And it's one of the reasons I absolutely love Saw 3, but I know a lot of people have their opinions about why it's not necessarily the best film in the world. So really good point there.
Yeah, objectively, I think that Saw 3 is a good film. It's just my personal opinion. I find a lot of the traps to be kind of, I don't know, kind of too gory and kind of gross for my taste, especially the pig vat.
No, yeah, it was that's absolutely true. Honestly, like Saw 3 was basically the beginning of the end when it became trap centric and trap oriented, just gross out oriented. The first 2 were really subtle, more so than a lot of people remember, just because of the latter films being so ridiculously big and gruesome.
Definitely. But Saw 6 is amazing. And it's like so far down the line.
Yeah. Saw 6 is legitimately amazing. And like I said, I keep saying, I feel like Shawnee Smith coming back is a big part of that. It's just the chemistry between her and Tobin Bell and just her presence in those films, the passion they bring to it and everything is one of the reasons that it really just kind of elevates it to the next level, or at least it feels tangibly a little bit more connected to the original 3 films, which are without a doubt the best in the entire series. Regardless of what you think, one of those films is usually on someone's top tier, first, second, or third, and you really just need those characters interacting with each other and kind of who brought this franchise up. And the whole point of it was that was one of the things missing from Saw 3D a lot, and also Saw 5 is it was missing those characters. It was missing the idea that they're actually working together and trying to develop Hoffman, which I feel like worked a lot. But at the same time, you need Tobin Bell, you need Shawnee Smith there. Basically either you need those people there basically just working off each other or working off other people, because I feel like they bring so much more to the franchise than anyone's admitted, or even other than fans. I feel like fans understand this, but other people, they don't necessarily see how those interactions of those actors actually make and break the original 3 films versus the other 4.
Definitely. Because I feel like Jigsaw and Amanda are way more complex characters and just have more depth to them and just better acting than Hoffman does. Like, no offense to Costas Mandalore, it's just, I find Hoffman to be a very generic villain. Like, I mean, he's complex for like 2 seconds whenever you see his sister getting killed, and then basically afterwards he becomes the mustache-twirling type villains.
He definitely becomes, he definitely transforms slowly into a interestingly complex character, or mysterious to interestingly complex to mustache twirling to basically Jason on steroids, basically with a knife working his way through an entire police station in Saw 3D is just weird in my opinion. And
that was so bizarre. Just how he killed everyone in that place. It's just like
he sneaks out in he sneaks out in a body bag and just kills everyone. Is this a weird film? Like it really just kind of jumped into being almost another genre of horror instead of its own thing. It was just like, okay, well now we're a slasher film. It's like, okay, I'm gonna try to like this. So I don't think it's his fault. I think it's what they gave him, and I think there's a lot there that's interesting, but he had nothing really to work off of because, like I said, unlike any indication that he would ever work off and basically play sibling rivalry, who gets dad's dad's toys, who gets dad's estate, after he dies, you have him working off of Jill, which is basically like it worked, but it didn't work as well as I think they thought. But one of the reasons Saw 3 is good, in my opinion, like I keep saying, is they had the balls to end it the way they did. They ended that franchise, and then they wanted to go on for more. And I don't think they ruined it by going on, but I don't necessarily think it was the best decision. They could have had some really cool concepts going into the last films, but to each his own. The thing is, I want to do a video about this later, but I feel like the problem with comparing the original 3 films to the latter 4, especially the last 4, 5, and 6, is the first 3 films were made as like separate entities of each other, and they feel not only connected, especially giving number 3, but at the same time they're so separate that they feel like independent films, and thus putting them together makes it somewhat of a very satisfying trilogy. But the other 3, the next 3, are very much connected to each other. They're literally 3 parts of one story, and I really appreciate that in some ways. In some ways I really don't, and that's getting way off topic. But anyway, guys, if we're getting off topic, it means that we're probably done here. Anyway, guys, I want everyone, like I said, doesn't necessarily cover this stuff, but he's always really kind to come and join me to have these just basically long-form discussions about Saw, because we don't always get to do long-form discussions about Saw. We really want to sometimes, but if you do like Dragon Ball content and all that stuff, please make sure to go check out Golden Scouter. He does some really good stuff. I don't want to send people who are thinking one thing and get another. You don't want those people. On your channel. But at the same time, make some really good content. Make sure to go check him out if you like Dragon Ball, and if you like Saw, make sure to subscribe and share out this video, because we will be covering this stuff more and more and more until Saw Legacy comes out, and then into the future, because hopefully it's not the last film, honestly. Hopefully it's just not the last one. But with that, guys, we're going to close this discussion. Golden Scouter, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Good discussion.
Yeah, I think so. It's pretty fluid discussion. Anyway, guys, tell us what you think about this. Do you think Amanda should be in Saw Legacy? Do you think it's a Saw film without Amanda? And we're going to catch y'all later.